Welcome to the Power Panel podcast, a show where we follow the leadership journeys of exceptional African women at the helm of public service and civil society. Our question is, how do African women lead and deploy power? I am your host, Ambassador Rachel Omamo, a senior counsel, diplomat and former cabinet minister in Kenya. It is 2002. A delegation of women leaders has arrived in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Amongst them is a graceful Senegalese woman. They are on a peace and conflict resolution mission, seeking to engage in dialogue with armed groups that are part of a raging conflict which is causing immense suffering to women and children.
People always say, why are you going to meet the rebels movement? Because they are African first, even though they are the one who take the guns and maybe they have also their own agenda. If you don't meet them, you don't understand. You can do research and you can talk to one party, but if you don't go to the other party, you don't understand what is going on. And you cannot bring peace, because if you put silencing the gun first, you need to talk to your enemies.
For almost 4 decades, Her Excellency Bineta Diop, Special Envoy of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission on Women, Peace and Security, has dedicated her life to the search for peace and the advancement of women's rights. She has contributed to founding treaties on women's rights, led peace-building initiatives, coordinated electoral observation teams, and facilitated women's peace dialogue in Africa. Her fidelity to these noble causes, as well as her leadership journey, have their roots in northern Senegal.
I'm born in a village, very remote areas in Geul, and I'm born in a traditional and religious family, in both. So you can see how gender equalities and women's rights were challenged in those areas. But I had really the chance to have a mother, fervent activist, and a feminist. I call her a feminist, but also a leader in her own rights in that village, married in the religious and traditional family both. I think that she taught me how to lead, because she was a leader in her community and enter into politics during time of Senghor. There was very few women in politics, but she entered into politics because she thought that, the transformation in our community, looking for what the need of the people, of the women in particular. When they give birth, they need to be in a hospital. So she was fighting for it. She was fighting for water. She was fighting for sanitation. She was fighting for young girls to go at schools. And I think she can only do it through the political arena. She was already in the social, that's why maybe politics was the one to come and take her, but not, herself entering, but I think she was very happy to get into politics. So when you talk about what shaped my leadership, I think that is my mother.
It is extraordinary that Binta's mother was a politician in the 1960s, when women's political engagement and activism was so rare in Africa. Her impact on Binta must have been quite weighty.
I think my mother first was very in solidarity with the people. But again, she was fearless. Other women in the patriarchal system, the entourage and so on, standing. I recall when Senghor came to our hometown one day, President Leopold Sedar Senghor, our first president, and my mother was the head of the women party, the We, in that region. And my mother took the floor. I was very young, following her step, So she said, and to Senghor, that what we need here is water and sanitation. And she put her agenda right in front. Instead of telling Senghor, yes, you are doing well, you are doing right, and so on. But she really took the floor. And I remember my elder sister say, "You're not going to say this." She say, "What? I'm going to say this to him." And she did. The powerful Senghor coming to your region in the first time, and you are standing there to tell him what this region needs. I think that is not something that was happening anywhere. For me, I think it's something that we really have to applaud on women who doesn't fear, and this kind of male leadership, and who can speak the truth. Why she was saying this, and she can stand and talk to the leadership, is because she has the power of the women. It's not her own power. When you are married in a family where, your husband is the king, or the husband is the religious leader, or the traditional, you have all the followers with you, right? You are educating the young women how they should behave. You are leading the traditional wedding. You are leading everything that has to do with the family. You are leading it. And she has the support and the buy-in of the population, because she was really listening to them. And that's what I learned from her, is that solidarity and being resilient. So sometimes you can have the food at the table, sometimes you don't have the food, sometimes you have to look at how you take care of your population. The drought, it comes, the cows. And so she was always at the front. She was, fighting, running, and going everywhere to make sure that the need of the people are met. And that's what I really inspire me.
What about her father?
I didn't talk much about my father, because in the course also my mother got single and was raising us as a single mother. But my father at that time, also being a religious leader, was considered by the community. I did not have that interaction, but what my father gave me also was this religious, to respect people, to service people, and that's what I got. Not being very much close to him, but following his step, in terms of honesty, in terms of loving, in terms of devotion to God, to Allah, because we are also Muslim, but also very open to other religions. So I learned a lot, because my father even went to war during the Second World War. He was very much also modern person in the meantime. I think that's what guide me from my family, my family values.
Binta gets married quite young to a diplomat. She has to learn to multitask as a young wife and mother, but to also retain her sense of self and guard her aspirations?
We say child marriage. Even for me, it's become, as I said, it's like a rape, because marrying young of 12 and 11, it's nothing else than that. But early marriage, let's call it like that. And yes, I was supposed to get early marriage. Fortunately, I got married when I passed 18, right? So for me, it's no longer, early, even though I said it is early because I was in my schools at the secondary school. But it was supposed to be before, So I was lucky to get my marriage after that and got my child. But I was also, like my mother, resilient because I wanted to study. I wanted to continue. Fortunately, my family moved to foreign. My husband, we were posted in a diplomatic area, Addis Ababa. So I had opportunity to continue my study in Addis, but also to continue and be exposed. And because this, what I look at is to be exposed, in the international community. Maybe that give me the passion to be in that arena. From there, we went to Paris and I continued my study at university and graduated, having a family, having a vision. For me is that I wanted to be there. Maybe I had to get married and have the chance to have my lovely children, but I want really to be myself. And that motivated me to continue managing, in an atmosphere which is not friendly. Because if you are in Africa, you have support system, but in country like France, and so you don't have any support system. Myself, running up and down, taking care of my husband, taking care of my children. I remember in the night when everybody was sleeping, that's where now I start studying. That's where I sit down on the desk and building myself, reading, and so on. When everybody sleep, now I continue. So it's possible, but you need to have that motivation of who you want to be. I could have said that my husband is a diplomat. Yes, I can stay. I have something, and that's fine. But no, I just challenge. And I know that I wanted to be the one that I am today. I had role model. Looking on my mother who have fought so much, I wanted really to continue the work that she had been doing. So I was motivated to learn more.
Resilient and determined, Binta successfully completes her studies and finds employment at the International Commission of Jurists in Geneva. She does so at a very pivotal time for Africa's human rights agenda.
I was the first African woman to join ICJ in Geneva. I was the first Black, not just a woman, but Black within the ICJ. Because ICJ is born out of the end of the Cold War, you remember, and they were lawyers, judges, judiciary from the Europe, trying to help Europe to rework their legal statutes and so on. But at the end, there was African men who decided to also were part of ICJ to say, listen, we need also to work on the African continent, look at our human rights. But what wanted is to have an African instrument, all by African, designed by African. When our father's lawyers, that was late Kebambai, a Senegalese man, who was the drafter of the African Charter on Human Rights, was at the ICJ. And I will really applaud the men who drafted the charter, that I was there because I was a Francophone, I speak French. Kebamba was leading the team, was a Francophone from Senegal. Even when you look at the African Charter, it's called People's Rights. It means that they wanted to include the people. In the other charters, you don't see the people's rights. They're individual rights, but they are community rights. And our community are very much linked with their values, with their traditional, sometimes good practice and sometimes bad, but it's a community. And I think that is where they build the charter to dismantle what is bad in our community, but to promote the rights of the community and the right of the people.
Not only is Binta so privileged to be proximate to one of Africa's most prominent jurists, Keba Mbaye, the president of the ICJ, but to also witness the work carried out by him and others in relation to drafting the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the Protocol on the African Court. She also receives a further benefit at the ICJ. She finds a life-changing mentor.
And that's how I got my mentor, which was Neil McDermott. He was part of the Churchill cabinet. And after they detached him to Geneva, a gentleman with a heart, somebody humble in us. I traveled with him in Latin America because at that time it was Latin America with all the generals, the Pinochet and all this. And we traveled to Asia together with the Eastern Europe and so on. When he was talking to head of state, he will introduce me first. This is my assistant who is going to take note. He will always promote me before any other body. I was there to support the team of Kebamba who were drafting the Charter on Human Rights, but also assisting the Secretary General, which was Neil McDermott.
The ICJ is an extremely influential international organization with a mission to build a world based on human rights standards and the rule of law. What impact did the ICJ have on Binta?
ICJ also opened the door for me to look at women's human rights. Maybe my mother told me a lot, but I did not put a finger on the issue. I saw the suffering of the women, of course, but to really analyze it, read about women's human rights, and to fight for human rights. So it was linked to my mother's experience. But now what helped me additionally was my exposure to the many fora from the Cairo, from so many conferences where you find the women fighting for their rights. So that helped me to engage in this agenda.
At our first signpost, though Binta was inspired by her extraordinary mother, she was determined to be herself, to realize her full potential on her own terms, and to articulate her mother's values in her own unique style. The lesson we learned from this is: learn from others, but do not duplicate them. Create your own essence, your own brand. Binta works with the ICJ for almost 20 years. Armed with solid mentorship, exposure, and knowledge, in 1996, she decides to form her own NGO, Femmes Africa Solidarite, FAS, devoted to preventing and resolving conflicts in Africa and empowering women for leadership in peace building. What informed this decision?
So what motivated me, when I look at into the Africa context, being at the ICJ, I started visiting countries in conflict. That is where now it was eye-opening for me to see how our women as Africa have been misused or used in the battlefield. You hate them rape because we talk about women's rights globally. But when you go that they are denied all the basic rights to control even their body, used by the male. So for me, that is where now I said, no, enough is enough. I have to practice what we preach. Let me go and create in my foundation, my NGO, Africa Solidarite, in solidarity to the women that are suffering. I could not take it. And I saw that in Geneva, where I was positioned, you have the Red Cross. You have so many NGOs that are supporting, coming to help us. I said, but are we taking our life in our hands? And how are we going to contribute positively to the transformation? So far started working, and my eye-opening was that the genocide in Rwanda. When I went to Rwanda, I saw the body. When I found, in church, in many places, because the body was still there. They didn't remove them. Women with the baby on the back, praying and being killed. And they are there. You just find the skeleton. 1 million people, and you find still the body there. It make me, I said, but we are human beings. I could understand fighting your enemy, which might be our artificial frontier. You can fight the country that is next to you, even though that is, the same people living in those frontiers. But in the meantime, now we are fighting between neighbors, between family, killing one another. My heart goes to the women of Rwanda, any countries that are suffering right now. The women are suffering.
Binta takes a gamble in setting up her own civil society organization to tackle women's issues in Africa. Civil society organizations often face challenges on our continent.
Yes, you rightly said it. The civil society movement, we have gained momentum, practical experience, and having impact. But, it's a constant pushback with civil society because government might think sometimes African that they are competitive. In Europe, what I learned is civil society are part of the, as we even quote, political arena, even if they say they are not politicians or for that. But in the meantime, they are part of the transformation, civil society, government, each one having their role, but respect them. But in Africa, it's so difficult, the space of civil society, because sometimes our government don't use them in a very strategic way. And I think that is where sometimes they are the pushback, thinking that government should do what civil society can do. They can complement one another because civil society are very close to the people and to the population. They can, bring the voice of the voiceless, but also go implement project of our government instead of government implementing. They build policy and they wanted to have a critical mass of people to do it.
Binta's work at the ICJ and FAS enables her to participate in the negotiation and drafting processes related to groundbreaking African Union conventions on the rights of women and girls. One of these is the Maputo Protocol on Women's Rights, an additional component of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as well as the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa.
The issue of the human rights, the women is diluted. We realized with the women's activists, there was a lot of women's lawyers in Kenya, in Senegal, in Gambia, and all this. They said, no, we need to have something additional because it doesn't address us. I said, so, the women are suffering. Their rights are neglected. How do we empower them? So what we did was now we say, let's have an additional. It's what we call the Maputo Protocol. We were young again, but we tried with ICJ to have the protocol, the additional protocol set up. So we put a draft committee who started drafting with young lawyers, and at the end of the day, we got it also called the Maputo. But there's a big story on how we got the Maputo. It was back and forth. Nobody wanted the men. As you know, they closed the door. That, the glass ceiling, they don't want what, the rights are the right. Why do you want right of women now? But we had to fight very hard to get it. And we were supported by many women, like Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, because for many years we drafted it, but it was, kept in those offices of the AU, and nobody wanted to open it. So what we decided was that, no, we need to revitalize the process. And it was thanks of newcomers like Madam Zuma when she came as Minister of Foreign Affairs. We grab her and we say, this is what we want, to discuss the Maputo Protocol, speed the process. And that's how we got it, like many other instruments we got from the African Union as well. So yes, now we have Maputo Protocol. We have the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa. It was also because we fought with people like Gertrude Mongela and many of us to get together and fight for head of state to have a debate on gender equality, not just the Maputo as an instrument, the Solemn Declaration, which was for us a monitoring mechanism.
Binta elaborates further on the negotiations around the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality.
My way of doing is always monitoring and looking for impact. When we have the legal instrument like the protocol, I said, great. We can domesticate, we can implement it at national level. But how do we monitor its implementation? We called for the heads of state to talk among themselves. There was a debate, and they decided to adopt a solemn declaration on gender equality. President Mbeki said, because we put a monitoring mechanism at the end of the decision to say head of state to report annually. And some of the men, the legal people in the AU, they said, no, you cannot ask head of state to report. To report to who? We say to us, women of Africa. It's no way. I said to report to themselves, so they remove it completely. But by chance, we have given the copy to President Mbeki before he came, and also we have given it to President of Kenya. We have given it to many presidents before we came to the meeting. President Mbeki said, but when is the last sentence that we're going to be accountable? So we said, but the legal people in the African Union Commission said, no, we should remove it. They say, no, there's no way that you just come and declare something without measuring. And that's how now the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality is being monitored. So otherwise, we will never have a monitoring mechanism reporting every year through the Ministry of Gender giving us a report. It's an instrument we are using, even though that is not sufficient. But we have a program, we have the legal instrument, and we have a monitoring mechanism within the AU.
As we take this short power break, we ask that you subscribe to the Power Panel podcast. Let's work together to expand the Power Panel community. Visit our website, birdsongafrica.com, and follow us on social media to plug into the Power Panel network. Email your thoughts to hello@birdsongafrica.com. When we return, we unveil the next stage of this journey. This is the Power Panel podcast. Binta developed into a consummate peace builder and mediator, seeking inclusion for women in peace negotiations in Africa, such as the Burundi peace negotiations led by President Nyerere and President Mandela, and the DRC peace negotiations led by President Masire.
The 80 participants of the All-Party Burundi Women's Peace Conference, held in Arusha from July 17th to 20th, 2000, presented their recommendations to President Nelson Mandela. They proposed the inclusion of the Women's Charter in the Constitution.
I was the first to facilitate the women of Burundi to come to negotiation by putting the Tutsi and the Twa to have one agenda. In the DRC talks, the Sun City talks, doing the same thing with President Masire, doing the same thing with President Mandela, working with them. So President Mandela, anytime I was bringing the women to talk to him during the peace talks, he would say, you are bringing light in the negotiation. So I continue to look at women not as victims, but women as those who can change the games, those who can make peace builders.
While advocating for peace and women's inclusion, Binta finds herself in situations where she must make difficult decisions.
And I recall in the DRC talks, we took a group of women. At that time, it was Madame Ruth Perry was a former president of Liberia. She came with us in DRC. We met with the young Kabila. He was just coming that year, coming to power, and because there was the country divided into two. You recall, there was the East Congo was completely controlled by the group, the rebel group. So we went to Kinshasa, met with him, and said, we are going to meet your enemy there because you cannot continue to have a country divided into two. And so we took the UN flight now, because all this also we got to the UN sometime, supporting our work. We went to the other parts and sit with the rebels group. And we talked to them. We spent nights and day with them. They were telling us why they were fighting, because, there are resources here. And the resources in Kinshasa is so far to control resources here. And other people are taking the resources, and we are also Congolese people, and we need to benefit from it. We are contesting because we wanted to benefit all of us. So they gave us showing us evidence on their fight and their agenda. So we said, but you need to go to Sun City for the talk. You need to dialogue. We listened and realize what is the division, why they are divided. Well, most of the time is sharing of power and sharing of resources. Can they protect the people? So we started by bringing the women. I said, where are your women? They said, oh, our women are not part of this because, they say, no, if you don't bring the women, we don't know the issue real. They bring the women. I can tell you, just to cut it short, when we came to Nairobi, President Kabila sent us a plane with full of women. The rebel group sent us the women, few of them, but very strong. So when the two parties of the women united, wearing one fabric. So both sides started to, oh, now you are on that side. The other one will say, you are on the other side. They don't recognize them. And you are issue one statement. So Kabila at certain point has even to call them back. What is happening? But at that time, we have worked with them that they talk in the same language when we went to Sun City. We work on them.
Women victims of war and conflict are not homogeneous. They have their differences regarding what peace means to them. How does Binta mobilize them and foster cohesion?
There is no recipe. What is important is the women, because we are talking about women, but it is not like you say homogeneous group. But those who are pretending to represent them should have the legitimacy. And for me, what is important is that representation, that they go and talk to the people. Talk, and first one, what we always do is to go to remote areas, if the region, go and call for the women to tell them, what is your issues? Make them speak. At the end, make their delegation. We believe on these women because this one is the one that can represent us. If you do that, instead of just picking, the men when they like doing, picking one woman because this is the one that I like because she will be silent, she will support me. But we go, first of all, the women that we are looking at in mobilizing the critical mass should be the one that coming from those women. It can be also women that have fought within the movement of transformation, that are the leaders that you recognize. But if you want it from the community, you need to designate the leaders, because we have leaders not just on top, but leader at the community level. Don't think that women don't want to support women. We do. But the problem is what they put on them is so heavy for the women to be able to be free in their mind and think of that women that I wanted to support. I have seen it. And all the time I see women who minimize another one. I say, look at her problem. She has already challenged herself. Maybe it's those challenges that make her not supporting the other.
From Binta's experience, what other ingredients are necessary for women to effectively participate in peace processes?
You need also to make sure that at the end they have a common agenda, right? On the case of the Burundi, for example, case, or even on the Somalia case that we supported, or the Manu River, Liberia, Sierra Leone, where the women led at the end the mediation. What you need is to make sure that they have one agenda. Even if one single sentence, it's like they said, the mediator said, is you are bringing light in the mediation or in the peace building. Because this is those who are fighting that have agreed. But again, the mediator has to be, my dear, very sensitive to this issue. Sometimes if you have a mediator that either is not sensitive, and that's why we are fighting to have women mediators, to have women to support the mediation team, to bring the gender issues. We are training young women like Femmes to be in there. We have Africa Women Leaders Network, former head of states. If they are just looking for former head of states or former prime minister or former minister of foreign affairs, they are enough to be in the mediation team because they have the knowledge and they have the experience. Why just having the men who sometimes they don't, yes, they were head of state, but do they understand the reality on the ground? So we say now in the mandate given to them, of the terms of reference specifically, we need to put in there that the women have to be part of this process, either by the parties in conflict to involve a percentage of women, or to invite women from the civil society to be at the table. And we know that the study has shown us that any agreement where the voice and the agenda of women are not included, at the end of the 10 years, it will fail. It's something we have observed for many, many years. We have Africa Women Leaders Network. There is no excuse. But what we need is action and accountability. I always say that if we don't have accountability process where we report and where we measure progress, we go down to say, in Ethiopia, did it happen? We measure. And we name and shame if it doesn't happen.
At our second signpost, Binta teaches us that peacemaking requires a spirit of hope, courage, and collaboration, as well as the belief in the agency of women and their right to sit at peace tables. Binta also leads important initiatives in connection with electoral monitoring and observation by African women. An interesting innovation is the Women's Situation Room.
We realize that our elections in Africa are violent. You have seen also America. You know what happened during the election in America. When it comes to sharing of power, sometimes men are violent and they use the young people, to throw them in the street and violence start, political party fighting and so on. So it becomes very violent. So for us, it's before, during, and after election. So we look at our different ingredients, the ecosystem that fuel that conflict. So we say that let's build on that to prevent. Let's put a prevention mechanism. We started by looking, where are the religious leaders who can speak? The influencers who can speak. Let's look at the young people to train them. Let's go to the women themselves that are the voters, the majority, to talk to them, to say peace. Explain them what is their role as, citizen. You vote, but you go in the morning, you watch, and you come back in the night. Get those who influence the election. Political parties, we bring them and the women to sign a pact to say that we are not going to promote violence in our different political parties. We target them. In Senegal, we did all this. Peace caravan, every single ingredient that is needed to that. And they were also training the young people and the women to observe the election. So now the situation room is just a tool that are using to analyze, to train, research, and to analyze. Within the situation, you find a group of women that are doing the early warning and early response. They are in contact with government. They have been given the authority, the authorization to observe, but also to intervene. They are called in media. They call them everywhere. Here, they call it Otujam. It is Otu is the place for peace.
Since 2014, Binta has held the role of Special Envoy of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission on Women, Peace and Security. In what ways does she use this position to further the women's rights agenda in Africa?
My work as the AU Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security is to look ahead of what is needed. We put issues like centers of excellence for women that can do research and training, like the one in Namibia, the one in Dakar, the centers here, the Pan-African Center with the master program on women peace. Also looking on just capacity building, but research by African for African, but also looking beyond that, the development. We had what we call GMAC, the Coalition of Women, African Women NGO, when we touch the NGO side, I talk about it, is something that is monitoring the work of the African Union. We have put in place also empowering women in agriculture, which is also areas that women need more support. We have just launched something we call the positive masculinity, is bringing men on board. Without men, we will not be able to transform, and with some head of state leading it as well. So we are having a lot of discussion among ourselves as the women leaders of Africa, and leadership is also at the bottom, is not just on the top.
Looking back on her contributions as a women's rights advocate, what does Binta consider her mother would think of her efforts?
She will be very proud, I'm sure, that for the African women, not just me, but what the African women have done in people like herself who are growing in the village and now are educated and who are themselves, defending their own rights. And I think my small contribution will make her happy in this journey.
What are Binta's thoughts about power and leadership? What is her power mantra?
So it means that you need to have that vision of transformation. And that vision even sometimes scare you. And everybody say, but it's impossible. For example, in February during the summit, we make head of state speak to positive masculinity, which they don't like to do, but was a vision to say, let's do it. For them also to take a decision that they are going to have a convention to fight violence against women. I want head of state to talk about violence against women, not just the women. When you have that vision, communicate that vision. People to understand that this is what you want for people to follow or to support. Engagement is another one that you need. Engage. Don't keep quiet. Don't stay there if you want the transformation. Collaborate with people. For me, I cannot walk alone. There is no way. Anytime I need something, I have a collaborator, I have people I consult. Anytime I need something, I always put myself to the body of the other. If I was Rachel, I would do the same thing. And when you do that, not you judge the people from your own perspective, but from their own where they are situated. That helped me a lot. At the end, we should be committed to justice and equity. I always say justice should be our leading, guiding principle.
As we conclude, we note that drawing from her mother's example, Binta has committed her life's work to ameliorating the status of women in Africa. She has not been afraid to walk untrodden paths in search of peace and equality, or to boldly speak out against injustice. Importantly for Binta, African women are not merely victims of their circumstances, but are instead centers of great power, able to bring about fundamental change, peace and prosperity for our continent. We thank Her Excellency Bineta Diop for sharing her inspirational journey with us, and we wish her well in all her future endeavors. This marks the last episode of Season 1 of the Power Panel podcast. We thank you for your support throughout the season and look forward to your company in Season 2. This is the Power Panel podcast.